Are you finding anyone who does think that Canada would be better off as part of America?
I think the Conservatives just don't know what they are. They've all got these caps printed saying MAGA, and instead of the first A, it's got a maple leaf. So hang on, so are you saying that you are part of the MAGA movement, in which case you want Canada to become the 51st state? They just don't quite know how to deal with Donald Trump, and Mark Carney has filled that gap brilliantly by coming in to replace Trudeau.
So does the U.S. still want to make Canada the 51st state?
I think the president has stated repeatedly he thinks Canada would be better off as a state. And he has said that based on what he was told by the previous prime minister, who said Canada can't survive unless it treats the U.S. unfairly.
That's America's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, being asked if Donald Trump still wants to make Canada a part of America. He doesn't really want to say yes, but he does.
And that is having a massive effect here in Canada, where people are going to the polls today. It has convulsed the general election here. Is it going to be the biggest political turnaround in polling history, where the MAGA party of Canada effectively is destroyed by Donald Trump? Welcome to the Newsagents. It's John in Toronto, Canada.
It's Emily, and later in the podcast, we're going to be reflecting a little bit more on the life of Virginia Giuffre, who died this weekend. She was Prince Andrew's accuser, and I guess our paths crossed in a rather unusual way.
But here in Canada, it is polling day. It is kind of bright blue skies outside, and Canadians will be going to vote in huge numbers if the early voting is anything to go by. And the Canadian system is very much like our own. It's first past the post. There are 343 constituencies. You just got to get a majority to get there. Now, 2 or 3 months ago, the Conservatives were riding high. Justin Trudeau, massively unpopular. He resigns. Mark Carney comes in as his successor for the Liberals. There's this populist leader called Pierre Poilievre from the Conservatives, who is sort of MAGA light, but, you know, a lot of the messaging sounds super Trump-like in what he wants to do. And what you're seeing is this extraordinary kind of tactical voting about to take place, I think, in Canada, where you're going to have parties like the NDP, which are to the left, voting Liberal if they think that's the best way to stop the Conservatives. You've got the Bloc Québécois, obviously in Quebec, the French-speaking part of Canada, which again is going to be really interesting to watch. And I think the name of the game is obviously to get a clear majority in this election. And the Conservatives, having been completely undermined by Trump, by MAGA, by the desire to make Canada the 51st state, and by tariffs, the polls are tightening a bit now, which is interesting. And what you're hearing as you go out is people, the Conservative supporters, saying, hang on, we've watched this movie before. We saw what happened with you all thinking the polls were right in America, and Kamala Harris loses. The same thing is going to happen here. Don't count the Conservatives out just yet.
Yeah, because you were at the Mark Carney rally with the Liberals yesterday, and I know you've been talking to Conservatives today. I mean, is there a chance that the whole kind of anti-Trump thing gained momentum, but then is sort of quietly slipping away? I mean, could we end up looking at something like a hung parliament in Canada?
Yeah, it's perfectly possible that does happen, that if Carney can't get the clear majority that he hopes, the polls are something like, the Liberals just above 40%, Conservatives 37, 36, 38, according to different polls. So you've still got the Liberals holding a narrow lead. What we don't know is the extent of tactical voting. And you think of the British general election, where kind of you saw Labour do well, where the main opponent was the Conservative, and then Liberals don't put up much of a fight, or Liberals doing well, where Labour are weakest. And so there is that scope for tactical voting that we're going to see play out here. I think the Conservatives just don't know what they are. They've all got these caps printed saying MAGA, and instead of the first A, it's got a maple leaf. So hang on, so are you saying that you are part of the MAGA movement, in which case you want Canada to become the 51st state. And I went to Pierre Poilievre's rally yesterday, the Conservative leaders' rally just outside Toronto. And it was fascinating listening to some of the people there, what they thought, how they explained it all. The easy narrative is that the Liberals, Mark Carney, are on course to win the Canadian general election tomorrow, Monday, and he'll be returned as Prime Minister. But come to a rally like this, and you see that the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre still enjoy enormous support. Maple syrup MAGA, they're being called. It's a great phrase, but they are trying to put as much distance between the maple syrup and MAGA.
Oh, this is I want to making Canada great again.
It's a bit of a confusing message, isn't it, when you've got MAGA on the other side of the border saying we want to make Canada the 51st state?
Well, basically, this is we need a change in this country, and
we need to make Canada great again.
Yeah.
But hasn't Donald Trump made that much more difficult for you?
The Liberals have made it.
But the last 10 years before Donald Trump came into power, what happened then?
Donald Trump has just made us realize that the Liberals have been screwing Canada over for the last 10 years.
Fuck Carney. Before that, it was fuck Trudeau.
But isn't the reality of this election, to use your vernacular, is that Donald Trump has fucked the Conservatives?
They're not the threat to Canada. They're the distraction. He's the distraction, so that we're not looking at what's going on within our own
But Donald Trump is making your life more difficult.
Not really. He's opening things up and waking people up to things that we should be awake to.
He wants to make Canada the 51st state of the United States.
You know what? I was born in the 60s, okay, and that's always been a joke about becoming American. Ever since I was a little boy, it was always toyed with and, joked about. It's a joke to me. First of all, you'd have to ask King Charles III for permission. We're still a Commonwealth country. They claim we're a sovereign country, but we're not sovereign if we have a king.
Donald Trump can stay in the U.S. He's made it a hell of a lot harder. If these tariffs escalate, the Trucking Association of Toronto figures in 3 months, the trucking across the border is going to drop by 40%. He doesn't care. Everyone says Carney is the guy to deal with Trump. Nobody can deal with Trump. But Carney will push Trump at every rally. Trump wants a liberal win. Trump has been manipulating this election since it started. And nobody's calling him out on it. Nobody. They talk about Chinese interference. Well, there's indirect interference from Trump. But because it benefits the Liberal Party, because it benefits the person that's going to be Prime Minister, nothing will get done about it. Nothing will be said about it.
Has he made life more difficult for you? Come on.
Well, I mean, I'm not a fan of his tariffs, but I mean, he's trying to put America first, and Pierre's going to try and put Canada first. And that's something I can respect about him.
You don't really like Donald Trump, though, do you? He's made life very difficult.
I mean, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but I'm not going to disrespect the President of the United States. I have an American girlfriend, so yeah.
You don't want to get into trouble?
I don't want to get into trouble, no.
So what's your view of Mark Carney?
Well, we were just speaking, and you mentioned that you were from England, and I said, well, so he's destroyed your country, now he's coming over here to destroy ours. You must know all about him.
Trump didn't do anything to us. The Liberals did, right? The Liberals ran our country for the last 10 years.
We need Canada back.
Yep.
It's not the same.
We need to be able to use our resources. We're not going to be able to if the other leader gets in. It's about bringing what's best for Canada.
Tell me, how's it going?
It's going great. Listen, I feel optimistic. I feel positive. You know, it's tough to say how's it going right now with this election in Canada because people are in such a tough time. Okay, the affordability crisis is huge. We're getting taxed because of the overburden, the cost of government. Crime is a major issue in this country. So for me in this election, where I say it's going great is I feel like there's a lot of hope and energy for a change, and I'm happy to be a part of that change.
I mean, I know politicians hate hypothetical questions, and I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. But if you lose, given everything you have just said about what concerns people and what keeps people up at night, what will your conclusion be?
We go again.
Yeah, but what would be the reason why you lost?
I have no idea. I couldn't tell you. I'd love to give you an answer, but you asked me hypothetical. I can't give you an answer to it, not because it's hypothetical. I have no idea.
Won't you be able to really say, put your hand on your heart and say, it was that bastard Donald Trump who did it?
I don't know. I don't know. That's the best I can give you right now.
But, you know, I've done politics kind of around the world. I have never seen polls switch in the way that they have here, where you were 20 plus points ahead 2 months ago, and now the Liberals are ahead. And the only variable in that is Donald J. Trump.
No, new leader as well. Right, you forgot that. Justin Trudeau resigned. Then they installed a new guy, Mark Carney. So that's not the only variable.
The biggest variable.
It's a variable for sure, and it's a large variable. But I'm not a pollster. I don't have the science background to be able to discuss that. I have no idea. All I know is what I'm hearing in my community when I knock on the doors, and I can tell you they're ready for a change.
And do you think it's possible that polls have got this completely wrong?
I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out in 48 hours whether polls are right or wrong. But for me, it's the pulse of the people, and the pulse is saying something different.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't trust the polls. I don't trust a lot of the mainstream media. You know, the numbers are jacked and they're not accurate. You could interview 10 people. Okay, now you got your percentage. You know, the only polls that matter are the polls tomorrow in our election. Okay, to me, I've never fallen for the fake polls. They're used to manipulate voters.
And what's going to happen in the election? It looks like the Conservatives are going to lose. No?
They're lies. No, I'm not going for the polls. I think we've got it good. We've got it strong. How many people were here today? Over 6,000 people.
There is no question of the Conservatives conceding defeat in this election. They believe that every vote is there to be won, and the only poll that matters is polling day itself. But if they do lose, how can you avoid any other conclusion when they were 20 points ahead 2 months out, and the change that has been brought is down to one person, and he's a few hundred miles south of here in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Donald Trump has upended this election.
I guess, Sopes, we're used to seeing nationalism as the sort of movement of the right, you know, predominantly sort of the kind of national identity as being the party of the right. Yet now it's being reversed, and it's Carney that's wearing the sort of Canadian nationalism more forcefully. But are you finding anyone who does think that Canada would be better off as part of America?
Well, just dealing with the Carney and Canadian nationalism point first, and the rich irony of that. Yeah. I mean, Mark Carney is quintessentially Davos man. He is the World Economic Forum. He is the IMF. He is the World Bank. He is central bankers. He is big corporations. And, you know, the idea that this is the guy that is taking the fight to the Conservatives, who are much more nationalistic, it just shows how much Donald Trump has turned everything upside down. Look, you can find a few Canadians kind of in scattered places out west, oilmen, cowboys, who do think that, yeah, maybe we would be better off as part of the United States of America. And there are others who say Canada's not a real country anyway. Look, you know, you've got a whole French-speaking area which have got completely different values to the rest of us. So Canada does lack an identity, and maybe we would be better if we were part of the 51st state. But I think that those are tiny numbers, and it's a real niche view in Canadian politics. I think what everyone wants is for Canada to survive and thrive. They just don't quite know how to deal with Donald Trump. And Mark Carney has filled that gap brilliantly by coming in to replace Trudeau, and also putting distance between himself and Trudeau, which, if you compare it to the American example of Kamala Harris taking over from Joe Biden, she totally failed. She said I was something new, but couldn't articulate in what way she was something new. Carney has come along and done new things, and that has made a difference as well.
Yeah, probably actually helps that he hasn't been in political life before. He's not been, you know, the vice president. He's not been in Trudeau's cabinet. As we say, he's a complete neophyte when it comes to politics, which is what makes this whole race so extraordinary. Just talk us through the timings of this now, because it's 8 o'clock your time? Presumably the polls are open now. When do we get a result?
Well, we're hoping for a result late this evening. But of course, you know, if there are recounts and if there are kind of spoiled ballots and all the rest of it, then it will go later still. I mean, I'm hoping, Mateless, by the time I talk to you this time tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the morning, we'll have a result, and we will know where we are, and we'll see whether Carney, kind of having come from not nowhere, but as you say, a political neophyte has pulled off the most remarkable comeback. I just want to talk about one other thing, because I think that what's fascinating is that, and I didn't know this, and maybe you did because I know you're a Canadian citizen, but there are no such things as independent off-licences in Canada. They are regulated by the state and run by the state. So the state of Ontario, here where I am in Toronto, runs all the wine shops, and there's no American booze for sale anywhere. It's all been removed from the shelves, as I found out when in the name of, deep research, I'll do anything for the newsagents. I honestly was prepared to go and buy some booze. This is one of the biggest wine stores in Toronto. Huge selection. Spanish wines over there, Italian there, French just over there. We've got Argentinian wines up here. If you go a bit further down, you've got some lovely South African wines, Zinfandels. But if it is a Californian Pinot Noir you're after, or a nice big strong Cabernet Sauvignon, forget it. There is not an American bottle of wine in this store or any other in Ontario. And just look at this sign. In response to US tariffs on Canadian goods, products produced in the US are no longer available until further notice.
If they ban us, we ban them.
And that goes on and on?
It goes on and on. It started by them, they can finish it.
So you think the government, the province of Ontario, is right to say no more?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Because it's setting up for Canada.
Is there a lot of that at the moment in Canada at the moment?
Yeah, big nationalism.
Have you seen it like this before?
No, first time. We're always quiet with our rah-rah, but nowadays it's come out with the Trump, we're all for Canada.
So I see you're filling up your basket. Yeah. No US wine in there.
But I understand why they're kind of doing what they're doing, and so now we just have to go to other countries. Bit of an adjustment, but you know what, not too bad, all for the cause.
What do you think of what's happened between your country and the US?
I'm hoping that there gets to be some adults in the room at some point and we get this thing solved, because it's not good for anyone, is the bottom line. And so I'm hoping that things get resolved sooner rather than later. So you never know what's going on from week to week, so you're just kind of hoping for the best at this point.
Well, there's a commercial war being waged right now, and you need to respond the best you can. And I think that was an easy thing to do for the various liquor boards across the country, whether the one here in Ontario, I'm from Quebec, the neighboring province, same thing there. You need to respond. You just can't let being bullied by somebody south of your border, right?
Anyway, we will be heading off this evening to a watch party where for one of the parliamentary candidates, and obviously only drinking Canadian booze while we're all there. And hopefully when I see you tomorrow, mateless, we'll have a result.
In a moment, we'll be back with Sacha Lord, the nighttime czar from Manchester, worked alongside Andy Burnham. His thoughts on where the UK economy is going wrong. Well, joining us now is Sacha Lord. He's the chair of the Nighttime Industries Association, and you might also know him as the former advisor to Andy Burnham. He's been the co-founder of the Warehouse Project and Park Life Festival. And Sacha, it is fair to say that you are quite surprised to be even sitting here in the newsagent studio today.
Well, I am. It's like rolling a dice getting the train from Manchester to London. Avanti, they are appalling, honestly. It's so overpriced. 250 quid to come down here, return. And the amount of times I've stood at Stockport train station and they tell you last minute it's cancelled. And to think about it, it's 2025, for me to wake up this morning wondering whether my train would actually get here. It's not right when you compare our transport to, you've just spoken about Japan, or closer places like Italy, Germany, Spain. They've got incredible train systems, and ours is just so backwards.
So what's our problem? You focus primarily on hospitality, on nightlife, on people going out.
Yes.
Is that working?
Hospitality, believe it or not, is having a tougher period now than it was during COVID. During COVID, there was financial support there. And coming out of it, they reduced VAT from 20% down to 5%. There's no financial support now, and people are finding it so hard. There's a stat that I read on the train on the way down here. How much do you think is the profit now on an average pint? 12p.
Oh, Jesus.
So for every pint 12p. How many pints have you got to actually sell before you start to make an income for yourselves? And it's heartbreaking to see. There are stats that we could lose now up to 9,000 pubs over the next 18 months. And if you think about a lot of those pubs, especially those community-based pubs, where it's more than just a pint. I always imagine in my head my grandpa going after work, and it wasn't a great business model, but he'd sit nursing a pint for 2 hours, just sat there speaking to his mates, especially when he lost my grandma. You know, that goes on and these pubs are closing. So what happens? There's nowhere for people to go. And there's an influx now of chronic loneliness in the UK, and this is not helping.
I think you've described the hospitality industry as like an episode of Black Mirror. I mean, we had Charlie Brooker in just last week, so our listeners will get what you mean. It's sort of...
Yes.
What? I mean...
You must have looked at my Twitter feed, because I said that last week. It is like we're in a hospitality Black Mirror. We are a punch bag at the moment. COVID, I don't like talking about it. It was 5 years ago, but we were the first ones to close. We were the last ones to open, especially nightclubs. We're still carrying so much debt, and the cost of living crisis is here. People are going out less. When they do go out, they're spending less. And places look busy at the moment, Emily, especially the last couple of weeks. The sun's been out in Manchester, which is very unusual, and it's back again this week. So beer gardens have been packed, and I saw a stat from quite a large brewery in Greater Manchester, and its beer gardens were up in the last 2 weeks between 35% and 64% year on year, which is incredible. But he's not making any money. As I said, 12p a pint.
Okay, so look, a lot of people will think, well, hang on, Sacha has been literally at the right-hand side of Andy Burnham, the man with all the power in Greater Manchester, the mayor, the man who's really, dug in quite deeply there. Why didn't you change it?
Well, actually, I did. So during COVID, I was the person that took Matt Hancock to court when he brought out the 10 p.m. curfew. And do you remember the Scotch egg rule?
Yes.
The substantial meal rule, in the most ridiculous thing. I took him to the High Court and won. And not my words, but the words of other people. At the moment, Greater Manchester, the UK's capital of nightlife, that's the Sunday Times. Time Out magazine, it was the 8th best place globally to go out. So we are going out. Manchester is busy. We sat here today in London. Compared to London, it's quite quiet, if I'm being honest with you. Manchester is still...
Well, it is midday, to be fair.
during the week and on a Friday night, it's particularly quiet. Manchester's very busy throughout the whole period, but I stem back to this thing where people just aren't making money and places are closing.
So why is that? Because as you say, we should have moved on from COVID. It's 5 years behind us now, pretty much. Why are we still talking like it's not over and we haven't recovered?
I'll give you a perfect example. So a pint is taxed 20 times more than a pint in Germany. We are one of the most heavily taxed industries in the UK. And I'll be honest with you, I was hoping that this new government would come out and support hospitality. We didn't have great support from the previous governments. I was hoping we'd have it from this one. And in the election, I could pick up the phone and get a meeting tomorrow with any of the cabinet ministers. And now it's like they're just not interested. They're in power and that's it, and they've moved on. And as a Labour Party member, it's heartbreaking. And they are doing some great things. I've seen stats this morning about NHS waiting lists and, really impressive that the housing policies that Angela Rayner is trying to carry out, which if she pulls that off is superb. But hospitality, again, there's no voice. And I think what the whole industry is calling for is finally a hospitality minister. Most of the countries in Europe have that, we don't.
But hang on a second, because the one thing, Angela Rayner, who you mentioned, said she wants to make London the best nightlife, one of the best nightlife scenes in the world. They've got a YIMBY agenda. They've talked about the need to get through planning regulations, get through the planning red tape.
Yes.
Isn't that how you get to sort of free up the hospitality industry?
And actually, I think it's really good what they do. It's a pilot scheme with London. And if it works with Sadiq Khan, they're going to run it out across all of the mayors across the UK. And I'm a big believer that we should get more devolved powers for the local mayors. Because as we've seen in Greater Manchester, it does work. What they're saying is the pavement licences. Do you remember during COVID, I keep referring to COVID, don't I? But how great it was. We saw the streets of Soho and places like that with all tables and chairs out, al fresco dining. Well, the one thing that restricts hospitality is the capacity. Especially, I've just spoken about beer gardens that were packed. Well, if you've not got a beer garden this week when it could reach temperatures of 28, people aren't going to sit inside a pub. They want a beer garden. So those pubs without an outdoor space are going to really suffer. Let's give them pavement licensing. And that's what the policy that Angela Rayner was talking about. Cut through the red tape and allow pavement licensing.
So she is
back.
doing it. She is listening.
She is. She's helping with that policy.
What did you think of the idea about no smoking in beer gardens?
It was ridiculous. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous.
Did you say that?
I did, yeah.
Did you say that to Starmer?
I
to a
did,
minister?
and apparently I've been told that was just a rumour. That was never due to happen. But was that were they just sense checking? And then they saw the uproar from the public and they did a U-turn on it. I don't know.
You've been quite critical of the national insurance rise that came in the last budget on employers.
Yes.
What is the effect that you think that has had? I mean, people were being quite dramatic about what they thought would happen. No hiring, no new jobs, lower wages.
Yep.
I mean, what actually is happening, or what has happened in the last 6 months?
Well, as we sit here today, this is the week where people actually get to find out how much it's going to affect them, because it's the end of month payroll, and this is when it kicks in. This is the first time they're going to be hit with this NI increase. And it's devastating. As you say, people are cutting back, people are reducing hours, people are cutting the amount of staff working on the floor, and they have to do that to try and break even. No one saw that NI increase coming in. There was no rumour or anything. And when it hit the industry, we just couldn't believe it. And I'm not just talking about hospitality, but retail in general. It is going to cost billions and billions and billions. I know people who've got outlets who are saying it's going to cost them another 200,000 to 300,000 a year, and for it to happen now, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Have you raised that with Rachel Reeves?
I've written to Rachel Reeves an open letter,
and
she wasn't very happy about it. To the extent, and I find this so petty, but the letter went out within 48 hours. Keir Starmer unfollowed me on Twitter, which I thought was very bizarre. But I got no response from Rachel Reeves, none whatsoever. In fact, I saw her a couple of weeks ago. I did the Laura Kuenssberg programme, and she just completely blanked me. And I think the industry needs to sit down with the Chancellor and the Treasury and have a proper conversation, because they're talking to all the big corporates of the world, but not the smaller independents. And I don't know about you, Emily, but I'd much rather go to my local bistro or local restaurant that's family owned, rather than these big corporate chains where it's the same uniform, the same menu, the same furniture on every single high street throughout the whole of the UK. And this is what we're seeing now. Those big corporates are swallowing up the small indie spaces.
I want to get back to your relationship with the Labour Party, because I think you threatened to quit a couple of months ago.
Yes.
And?
So I was a Labour Party donor. I'm not at the moment. And it's all hinges now for me on the autumn budget. That's it. If there isn't help for hospitality, which I was promised there would be in the election, if there isn't, then it's not the party for me. And I actually think we're going to see a huge shock this week in the local elections and the mayoral elections. I really do.
If you were in government, you'd say that's never going to be a shock. I mean, what do you mean by a huge shock? Let me ask you what you mean.
I think we're going to see Reform take a lot of seats this week.
And is that where you're heading now?
No, most definitely not.
I mean, I guess, if you're in power, you say that's what it feels like to be in power. That's what happens when a government comes in and they get a kicking because people, use the local elections, lend a vote to kind of give you a good kicking if you're in power.
I've just never... In my lifetime, I cannot remember this country feeling so flat, so demoralised. No one has a good word to say about it at the moment. And all those people who I was talking to during the election who were extremely excited, not just people in hospitality, who were extremely excited about the new government coming in, are now completely deflated.
I mean, I guess the Labour government, has never shied away from telling us that this was going to be bloody awful. At the beginning, that the national insurance raises that came last October were to try and plug a £22 billion black hole, and that there wouldn't be another budget like it. Do you believe that?
They're hurting the working people, though, and that's not what I thought the Labour Party was about. I saw some quite basic but true maths that if they taxed the top 20,000 people in the UK, that's all the top 20,000 people who've got assets and cash more than £10 million, that would raise £24 billion a year by taxing them just 2%. So why not introduce that tax rather than affect the normal working person on the street?
Does it matter if the super rich leave this country?
I think it does, yeah. We need entrepreneurs to keep the country going.
So how do you balance that? Which is, as soon as you set yourself up as the government that doesn't mind, taxing the rich, you're basically what?
It's 2% though. So I'm sat here now as somebody that sold my business last year. I sold the Warehouse Budget and Part Life last March. So I don't have to worry about bills. I don't have to worry about going out for a meal, how much that's going to cost. Or
so you'd say tax me more?
I'd be happy to pay 2% extra a year. No problem whatsoever. If I thought that would help working people, no problem.
And why do you think this isn't getting through then?
I just don't know. I don't.
Do you think she's a good chancellor?
No. No, I don't. I think a few weeks ago, I think she was almost having knocks on the door. From Starmer. I think it could have been time for her to go.
Do you know
that? A few
that?
Weeks ago. I don't know it, but it was the rumour mill that was going around. I think it's stabilised now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few months.
One of the things that we're hearing about is some kind of visa scheme for the young, the under 30s, to move around Europe more freely. Obviously, all that ended with Brexit.
Yeah.
Would that be an imperative for you? Is that important?
I think that would be great. And I tell you one thing, it would definitely help. So, my big festival, Part Life, when, I hate to use the B word, but when Brexit happened, that kind of cut off all grassroots bands. You know, the bands that we used to hear about that would jump in the back of a 500 quid van, chuck all the equipment into the back of it, and then go to France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, doing all these gigs for 50 people. They can't do it. It's not viable. It's not viable. They have to pay for a visa now. It's every single border. So it does feel as if we're starting to edge slightly back into the EU. Not fully, but we're warming towards it, and I really welcome that.
You know that if any government minister heard you saying that,
yes,
they'd slam it shut very quickly.
Yeah, well, I just speak the truth. I'm not a government minister, so I can say.
You think that we're actually edging back into the EU? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think we'll fully go in there, but I think there's going to be a softer approach towards it, yes. I mean, I would really, really welcome those visas for bands again, because without those small grassroots bands, we're not going to get the headliners that I used to get, like the Stormzy's of the world and people like that. It's not going to happen because Ed Sheeran started off in tiny, tiny venues. It's stopping it, and actually festivals now are becoming quite boring. If you have a look, it's the same headliners at every single festival throughout the UK.
You've been very clear about how outspoken you're prepared to be. I want to talk a little bit about your departure from Andy Burnham. Did you?
Yes.
I mean, did you end on a bad note?
Not at all. No, we're still good friends.
Because you resigned after that, was it 400,000 COVID recovery grant?
Yes.
You want it for your events company. It was then pulled after inaccuracies in the application.
Yes.
And as a result of that, you threatened to sue the Manchester Mill, an independent news publication. They exposed those inaccuracies. A lot of people would be, I guess, sitting here listening to you, big up Manchester, loving Manchester, thinking, why on earth would he threaten to sue one of the kind of up-and-coming grassroots publications that was putting Manchester on the map?
There was a bit more to it, to be honest. Firstly, the Arts Council have come out and said there was no intention to mislead after they did 2 full investigations over a 12-month period. So that was that. I was a minority shareholder, but the problem was, Emily, because my name's above the parapet, that's who they ran with. The problem was, it was upsetting my wife. They were digging in her past and on her social media and everything. And that's what, at the very, very outset when the article first came out last year or 18 months ago, that's what I wanted to stop.
Was it worth threatening to sue them?
Well, it was. My wife had just announced she was pregnant. I wasn't going to let any of my family go through that. So, yeah, and I'd do it again.
And what's happened to the grant? What's happened to the application? That's gone and
Well,
everybody's gone, right?
Firstly, that all went on just staff wages and everything. No one received any money. I didn't take any money. No one took any dividends, or no directors took wages. So that's now with the receivers. I'm no longer involved in that business. But I've helped the Arts Council throughout the whole thing.
And if you say you're still good friends with Andy Burnham,
yes,
would you go back if there was a phone call saying, let's put all that
I don't
behind
know,
us?
because I'll be honest with you, during that whole period, 7 years it was, and I volunteered my time. There was no wage involved or anything like that. In fact, it cost me money. But there were certain moments when I had to sit on my hands, when I thought the party was doing the wrong thing. And I only did that out of courtesy because I didn't want it to bite
Is
Andy.
Andy Burnham the party? Do you think of him as being...
Absolutely.
Right.
But he's a slightly different politician because he puts place before politics. And you've met more MPs than I have.
Well, I'm wondering if Andy Burnham shares your frustrations with what's going on.
Well, he has
in
come out.
Westminster.
He has come out over a couple of things. Disability allowance. I've noticed he didn't toe the party line, and that's because he puts place before politics. And he's a different kind of politician. What I like about Andy Burnham, he's the same person off camera than he is on camera. And I've met so many MPs who are complete arses once the camera's off. And I just think, why are you representing us when you're that type of person?
If there was something now, two things that the government could do to win you back, or to make you feel that the economy was going in the right direction, the government was listening, that they were prioritising, I guess, hospitality and nightlife for the UK, what would it be?
There's one thing, actually, and it's something that the whole industry is asking for. So, ironically, the previous governments, they've probably understood hospitality better than this government. I know it's a bigger debate now because it did spread the virus. But when the Chancellor at the time, who was Rishi Sunak, brought out Eat Out to Help Out campaign, firstly that says he understood that the industry was in dire mess. The industry needed help, and it most definitely saved businesses and jobs. He then went further and did something that was incredible. He reduced VAT from 20% to 5%. That, we know it saved jobs. We know it saved businesses. He then nudged it up to 12.5% within 3 months, and then was back at 20% within 6 months. We are the most heavily taxed industry in Europe, as I told you. So other countries have a specific hospitality VAT rate, which is between 7 and 8%. Even if we reduce down to 12.5%, would still be more expensive than 26 other countries in Europe. So I would say to the government, if they really, really want to help the industry, reduce VAT down to 12.5%, even if it's just for a temporary period of 2 years. And we're not asking for money. We're not asking for, a check. But what I'm saying is it's probably better mathematically to get 12.5% of something than 20% of nothing, which is a shut business.
And what's your prognosis if you don't get that for the industry in the next 2 years?
It's not healthy. It's actually heartbreaking to see. So I used to have my DMs open on Twitter where you can get private messages from anybody. I've had to turn those off, Emily, because the messages I get at 2-3 in the morning of people, so I'm reading them when I wake up. And yes, they may have had a drink. They are heartbreaking to read, especially people. I'm getting messages from people who have the family who live above a pub. They're about to lose not just their business, but their home. And it's, where do we go from here? And the British pub was a great British institution, and we're losing them.
Sacha Lord, thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Virginia Roberts has made allegations against you. She says she met you in 2001. She says she dined with you, danced with you at Tramp nightclub in London. She went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell, your friend. Your response?
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No.
She says she met you in 2001. She dined with you. She danced with you. You bought her drinks. You were in Tramp nightclub in London. And she went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Didn't happen.
Do you remember her?
No. I have no recollection of ever meeting her. I'm almost, in fact, I'm convinced that I was never in Tramps with her. There are a number of things that are wrong with that story.
That was the interview I did with Prince Andrew in 2019. And the person I was asking him about was Virginia Giuffre, formerly Roberts. On Saturday morning, I woke just before 4 a.m, jolted awake by the radio playing softly beside me that reported her death by suicide at the age of 41. I never met Virginia Giuffre, but our paths crossed curiously through that interview. She claimed the prince had sex with her 3 times as a 17-year-old when she was trafficked through his good friend Ghislaine Maxwell and her boyfriend, the now notorious paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. It was an allegation Prince Andrew vehemently denied to me. Virginia lived a hellish existence by all accounts, abused first by a family friend at the age of 7, then trapped into modelling as a teenager by a man who promised her fame but delivered yet more sexual abuse. She ran away from home. She lived life on the edges, ended up in hostels and children's institutions. And perhaps the worst irony was that when she finally returned to her family, ready to start a steady job, turn her life around at the Florida Beach Club, Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago, she was then fatally introduced to Epstein. She was flown around the world as a sex toy for him and his friends, until finally she ran away to Thailand. She married an Australian man 10 days after they first met. This was her escape from a life of abuse, and she remained in the shadows until the FBI came knocking, asking what she could tell them of Epstein, a man who would never face the consequences of his actions, even after his initial arrest, until his own suicide in jail in August of 2019. When Virginia finally told her story to the Mail in 2011, she spoke out for other victims of sexual abuse. She started campaigning for them through her charity, SOAR. She was unafraid to point the finger at those in power, those who'd made her life unbearable. After Epstein's death, she wanted to face Prince Andrew in court. He agreed to a settlement of millions, but never admitted guilt. She gave much of that money to her campaign. We didn't hear much from her in the subsequent years, until a random, odd post nearly a month ago. She suggested she'd been caught in a car crash and had just days to live. And at that point, the tone seemed to change. In the weeks after, people who'd barely spoken to me about the interview would ask me what I thought, if I thought Giuffre was, in fact, a fantasist, somebody who'd made her own story up. What if she wasn't to be believed, they asked. What if she was a bit unhinged? What would I feel then? All that changed this weekend when she took her own life. Suddenly, that muttering stopped. A dead victim was somehow a believable victim. And it made me feel really uneasy, because it suggests that we can only believe victims of sexual abuse once they've literally lost their lives to suicide, as if that last act of self-torture proved that they were speaking the truth all along. That cannot be right. We have to believe women whilst they're alive. We cannot wait for them to die before we say, oh, okay, maybe she was in pain. Now she's calmly, Ophelia-like, drifting away. Virginia Giuffre was subjected to myriad, multiple abuse, and she did the hardest thing of all by speaking out, trying to hold those in power to account. Her story is perhaps one of a lifelong pain, one she clearly never managed to escape, and perhaps we should have been prepared to believe that while she actually remained alive.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.